Welcome to yet another discussion on React.js. This week we've been studying some more advanced sort of compositional patterns. So what does it mean to compose out an application? And how do we compartmentalize our data and start to think about it in, in terms of, single responsibility or single source of truth principles and things like that. So we've kind of been on along those lines. We've been working on this project, the React Instagram clone, which I'm sure you're all just super excited about, and you're not tired of looking at these images at all. Hopefully that's the case, is that you're not tired of looking. Well, it's just going to happen. Sometimes you get working on a project and, that's where you're going to be. So I'm going to open up a questions answers thread. But yeah, sometimes you get working on a project and it just kind of gets tiring and a little bit, you look at the same stuff day in and day out and it's like, well, what's changed? And, not much changes each day, but hopefully each day this week you've been kind of making progress along the way. So, okay, so yesterday what we did to our app is we sort of separated it out by the by way of looking at our nested data. So if you look at our data, our dummy data, we have an array of objects. Now each object in and of themselves has an array of comments. Okay, so I sort of went down the path of taking that comment section and separating out our data as its own state. Okay, and the reason that I wanted to take this approach was because I want to be able to manipulate this array a lot more simply than just passing data back up to all the way up to the parent. Now I know some of the instructions sort of directed you to do it the latter direction by passing everything down nested down to the grandchildren all the way back up to app and loop over the dummy data. So the algorithm was loop over the dummy data for each object in dummy data, find some unique identifier to identify that object, right? And then add the comments there, right? Yeah, so the reason that I separated it out this way was because that gets a little bit cumbersome when we're passing stuff all the way down through the state tree, through the application tree. I felt like it would be proficient to separate the data out here. Now, in terms of state management, with this type of object, and we're going to have some persistent data and things like that, this technique does present a couple of problems, and I'll go over my solution to a couple of those problems in this little guided walkthrough of this, how to add comments. But Mark said he was stuck on trying to figure out how to do it all the way from the grandparent. And that's one of the inherent problems with React, is data flow is sort of top to bottom, right? We separate out our components and then we pass data from top to bottom. So the data flows through our application in that direction. And then our events, they sort of trickle up, right? Up the state tree. What I'm talking about is if we had like a tree here that had a bunch of components on it. Let's get a little drawer. So we have this tree and it has these components, that eventually down here you'll have other components. This could have potentially multiple children, right? This could look very similar to the way our app is being built, right? And this could have multiple components here. Now, as data flows downward to each component, what I'm choosing to do is split that data off. So we have our initial object up here that has data, 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 right? And then it has this nested array of comments. So I'm choosing to split that comments off and store it on its own state object here and let this comment section manage that state. So that way, when somebody comments on something, it just manipulates the individual comment, right, for each, or individual comment array wherever that is found. This is the inherent problem with React. Your application is going to grow. This isn't a very sophisticated application. It's not super complex. There's not hundreds and hundreds of files and directories and multiple components being wired together. But you can imagine, just by seeing this pattern, how we are a few levels deep. And if I want to call some event down here, I have to trickle the event's properties all the way up to where that event is defined to manipulate the state. So this is one of the bigger things of what people scoff at when they say React's state management is terrible. I think it's actually pretty awesome if you just kind of buy into it and you know what you're doing. But that's why I have experience building stuff like this. So that's why I see a nested array and I'm like, oh, I'm going to manage that state right here at a child level, and I'm going to use that state management to my advantage, right? This particular complex problem is why libraries like Redux and MobX were created. So, or why people use them in React applications to manage their state in this way. So we're gonna go about this in this direction. And once again, it's just my implementation. You could have done it another way. Can't we just pass down the relevant click handler to each child prop until the relevant child or grandchild uses it? Yes, you can. Absolutely. So I think I just clarified that by that little diagram. Yeah, you pass the handler down as far down as you need it. Camry said, I did it this way, but couldn't figure out how to a solution I liked to saving the application state to local storage. So I ended up going back all the way to state app. I'll show you a cool solution to this. If we can get a commentary on how that would be handled with divided state, that would be cool. Yep, I'll show you. And what it's going to require is actually we need to send down a unique identifier for those objects themselves, because we're going to create 3 different arrays and store them on local storage and manage them there. Okay, so it'll be really cool. Because remember, comment section is being created for each item in our array. Okay, so it's really nice that it's set up that way. So let's just kind of bust out the solution and kind of observe and ask questions along the way and make sure that you that things are clear. If I do something that's unclear, please let me know. Okay. So where we're getting this data right here, we have state.comments.map for each comment. Let me think about the design of this really quick, just so I have a solid approach before I move in. So each comment section is being produced inside of the post container. Yep. Okay. So we're going to pass down a unique identifier that sets this comment section apart, because post is being generated for each post in our application. Okay. So on our post, we have this data that's being passed down. So right now, comment section is only receiving comments. And remember, we're generating 3 of these for our data, or for as many pieces of information there are in our app. Okay. Let me go live so those who want to follow along whilst I type, you may. Cool. Hide the notifications. Sweet. So yeah, we're gonna kind of just walk through this and play around and see what happens as we make stuff happen. So remember, props has a post object on it, right? And every single object has a unique URL on it, image URL. So I'm just going to pass that down, and we're going to label it on a prop called post ID. This is going to come in handy in just a minute. Because we're going to use this ID to identify, we're gonna basically use this to set our key value pairs in our local storage. Cool. So let's go down to comment section, and let's kind of see what we need to work with here. So each comment or each comment section is going to have their list of comments that are going to be displayed like so on the page. And then I'm going to be able to type in this input field and hit enter, and it should push those comments into the comment array. So there's a few things that we need here. We first need to We'll get to local storage at the very end of this, but we first need to make a comment handler, because we need to hold on to some state in local memory. So I'm just going to say comment equals an empty string. And then I'm going to build out a comment text handler function that's going to take in the event and say this.setState, so change the comment to the e.target.value. And then we can bind that state to, or bind this comment to our input field. And then make sure that we have a value that equals props.comments. Go back to comment section, pass down our handler. Whoops. This dot change handler, comment text handler is what we want to pass down there. And we'll say on change props dot, and I called it change handler, right? Cool. So Sam asked a very good question. What if two different users happen to use the same picture, say from the same source? The odds of, so the only way that that would actually, in a real world edge case scenario, would happen is if the same user did that, right? If it was the same Instagram user. So normally, yes, our data, and I'm thinking about refactoring this for next time to include an ID. It just would have been so much nicer, I think. So I'm going to massage this data a little bit for next time around, and I'm going to include a unique ID to this. Okay, so we'll just put 3 unique IDs on this data. So yeah, normally if you see an object, an array of objects that don't have a unique ID, I mean, they all have timestamps that we are supposed to use to make our timestamp look nice and pretty, but I haven't been doing that yet. But yeah, so good question. You're making me think now. Anytime a student makes me think is really nice. Sure, it'd be nice. It'd be easy to concatenate the URL and username, but yeah, totally. David said, if you refactor it to a unique ID, could you refactor timestamps to work with date value? Yeah, they should be a date string. Currently, they won't be. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. We'll have to take a look at that. Get a real timestamp there that can be interpreted. Cool. Okay, so all we've done so far is just created our little handler. Let's make sure that it works by going into our app. We need to stare at our React Dev Tools. So hopefully by now you are all getting very proficient with your dev tools. So if I look at this comment section, and I think it's going to be, yeah, we'll just try and see. Nope, it's not that one. Yeah, it's this one. So if you notice, it's adding our comment. Cool. So that's going to be our comment. Now we need to build out our comment object and push it into this array, and we're done. Simple, right? Just like a to-do list. Cool. Okay, so we are going to make some sort of comment submit handler that is going to that's going to be bound to that input, right? We want it to be on the form submit. Okay, so we will build a handler, and right now all I want it to do is just alert something so that I know that it's linked up. So I'm going to say comment submit handler. And then I'm going to prevent the default here so that it doesn't refresh the page for me. And I'm going to alert clicked. Pass that down to our comment input. And I'm going to call it save handler. Okay. Go back to the input and say on the form on submit, props dot, what did I call it? Save handler. I always do this backwards. Okay, cool. Cool. So now if I type in that little form and I hit enter, we should click that handler. Cool. So now we're ready to write our algorithm that's going to take our comment text and hard code a username on it and then push that into the comments and set the state, and we're done. Cool. Well, we're done as far as just the functionality, but then how do we get that data to persist? So let's try this. So I'm going to say const new comment equals an object whose text is set to this.state.comment, whose username is set to Leroy Jenkins. Okay. Then we're going to say const comments equal this.state.comments.slice. Why would I want to slice this here? Why do I want to slice it? Yeah, we want to clone it. We don't want to change the original array. So causing mutation would be to push right into that array. We're just going to push into the copy, and then we'll just overwrite. We'll reset the whole array with the shallow merge. Okay. Yep. So that you can just update from state, or update through set state. Beautiful. Okay. So now all we need to do is say this.setState, and I can say comments equals comments now. And what's cool about this is I have a variable called comments, and I'm selecting the property on this object comments, right? So I can shorthand this with ES6, and I can just say, because this variable is defined and it means something, this is shorthand for saying select the property comments and then assign it to the variable comments. It's really nifty. I don't know how many of you have been using that thus far. Cool. All right, so we should be able to, just like we would in a to-do list, add a comment to this array, and it should only affect this post's comments. So I'm going to say killer stream. And we still have the alert. Awesome. So that alert went, and Leroy Jenkins just mentioned kill stream. I used to play. Wow. I need to get rid of that alert. But yeah, now you see that it's only affecting this array, and it's not, it's really succinct because it's just the array that we care about. Remember, React, all React cares about is just taking data and putting it on the screen, right? So for us, we care about as developers how to manipulate that data, which is why I, chose to just pass it through and set it on this state. So I'm just updating this state object. But now the tricky part begins when I want to actually update the local storage with this information. So I'm going to do a couple of quick tricks to let that happen, and then I'll be able to pause for any questions or anything. Okay. So yeah, and then this was reset the array on state so that our render gets called, all a part of the component lifecycle. Okay, so I'm going to use a portion of the component lifecycle to do this. I'm going to use component did mount, And I'm going to think through this algorithm as I kind of type it out. Actually, that's a, notice the difference in the syntax here. Component did mount is, it comes from the base class, right? So we're extending React's base class so we have access to it through props, right? Through the, the extension there. So I'm going to use that nifty ID here. And I called it post ID. Did I call it capital post ID? Just make sure that my stuff is all lined up. Okay. And then we're going to check something. We're going to check if there is an item in local storage called by this ID. So it's really simple. So if local storage dot get item, and then simply pass it the ID. If that's true, if it exists, trying to think how I want to do this. I'm going to have to create a function. Yeah, we're just going to say comments now will equal how do I want to do? Yeah, so I'm going to set the state. So this is what we're going to do. If ID exists, set the comments by that parsed array. Else, call set comments. I think this is how I did this for the solution yesterday. So then set comments will be a function that we're going to use to actually take what's on state and set it in local storage. Okay? So let's build that function first, since our component did mount completely relies on it. So I'm going to say set comments is a function that's only job is to take local storage and set the item of this.props.post ID and set it equal to our state comments, our comments that are on state. So we're going to JSON stringify this.state.comments, and that should do it. I'm trying to think. So now we're going to have 3 unique objects in our local storage that are bound to the post ID. And their value will be the stringified comments when this function gets called. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to be able to use it in multiple places within our application. So if ID exists, then we're going to set the comments to the parsed array. So I'm going to say this.setState comments. This is hard to keep track in my head, so I'm doing my best. JSON.parse local storage.get item by ID. And then it should put an actual proper array of comments on our state. So now we're just going to override state a bunch of times, right? It's not going to be the original data if this works. It's going to be the manipulated data that we have put together with our little submit handler here. Else, we need to set those comments, because if it's not defined, we need to set comments anyway, and so we'll call that function. Geez, that's a lot of work to think through, because you're doing a lot of things here in turn with a lot of things that you're trying to get the hang of. So it's not easy. It wasn't a trivial task to set this to local storage. But now if I refresh my page and I just called component did mount, let's go look at our app local storage. And if you notice, I now have 3 objects in memory. And I need to delete this one from yesterday. I think I can just do it straight from the command line. So let me delete mounted. Okay, cool. So those were used in yesterday's demo. But yeah, so check it out. Now it's going to, on page load, it's going to set those objects. So for each of these items, we're now pulling these objects on this array out of memory, parsing it and setting it on our state for each item. Cool. So now what do we do when we actually save an item? Well, we need to overwrite, we need to reset the state, or we need to reset the local storage. So I'm going to call this.set comments. Now I have a feeling from what I remember doing this yesterday, and then if I refresh, it's not there. If I refresh again, yeah. So I have, oh, where are those mounted in comments coming from? Where is that? In the code. Trying to find out where those are because I want to get rid of them. Is it in app? Oh, okay. Okay. So none of this needs to be there anymore. So just comment it out. Okay, cool. Thanks for sticking with me on that. Okay, so let's look at this. So this is actually kind of a problem because we have what's called a race condition right now, where we're trying to set the comments, but set state is happening asynchronously. Okay, so what we're going to do just to fix that, and this is kind of a hack. Well, yeah. Is we're going to set comments here. Now, there's another way I could do this, and it is to use functional set state, but I haven't covered that with you guys yet. So component did update to set the comments. Well, it's hard because component.update has access to the previous state and the previous props, but not the current state. So I'm just trying to figure out the best place to do this, but there may be a better place to do this in the component lifecycle that I'm not thinking of. So the question was asked, would it make sense to do this in component did update to set comment? And yeah, the answer is there's probably a lifecycle method that makes this much easier. But I'm just going to try and do this for intents and purposes of this little demonstration. And then what needs to happen is if our page refreshes and we unmount the component by any chance, component will unmount should set the comments as well. So really remember, set comments only responsibility is to take what's on state and set it into local storage, right? So let's go and, ooh, it looks like we have an error or something. What did I do? I changed something. Ah. Well, that's what I had changed. Okay, so now let's actually add a comment to this top one. And let's see if I guess that's the bottom one. So which one of these is Phil's coffee? There we go. Okay, so Phil's coffee, we're going to add a comment, best coffee. And notice that it not only added to our screen, but it's also persisted now in local storage. So if I did my logic right, I should be able to refresh. Hey, oh, it's resetting the states. Interesting. I have to look at my algorithms or look at my logic here. It's because, I think it's because, no, it can't be that. I just have a feeling that I'm doing something wrong. Is this spelled right? Component will unmount set comments. Get rid of my alert real quick. I think it's because it's overriding it on mount. So it's getting overwritten on component did mount. So if local storage.get item does exist, then set state let me see. Debugging here. I'm gonna have to pull up my solution branch and look at it. So we're hitting that every time. So these do exist. This is what the state should be. Why would it do this? I don't know what my logic is. I'm gonna pull up my solution code and see. Give me 1 second. Okay. Oh, I called it. I had to have called this something else. Change comment. Okay, so these two things need to go down to input. Props.comment. Okay. Does it work? Does it persist? It does, and I don't know what the difference was between my solution code and then the code that I was just writing. But yeah, so you can, this is already deployed up to Code Sandbox, so you can play around with it and see what the solution was or where the problem was. But I don't know honestly what the issue was on it. So maybe I had a typo somewhere and I wasn't invoking a function. So Camry asked, can you pass set comment as a separate argument to set state? For example, like a callback argument. The answer to that is you should be able to if you use functional set state. So, and we haven't gone over that, and I don't want to touch on that major thing right now. But yeah, it might be an eloquent solution to this problem that I'm having with that stupid race condition right there. Cool. So yeah, really for data persistence, the bigger step was, having a unique identifier for your components. So figure out how to, make each item in local storage be a little different, right? And then, you can play off of that. So yeah, and then that's the most difficult part of this. The rest was, this, from these lines up, this was just like your to-do assignment. As long as you had state here. The problem with state being all the way above is, yeah, you'd have to go all the way up the props chain. So questions or comments about adding comments? Did you add any form validation, or will empty strings be added? I did not. One way that I could prevent that is a simple if this.state.comment is an empty string, return, but before I return, so stop the program from running is what that's saying, right? Don't move on to any of this. And I should probably default before. And then what I'll say is alert, you must provide a comment, whatever. Yeah. I feel duped. As I was following the README to follow the props chain up, but in the solution, we're being given it in a more simple functioning manner. This is encouraging me to follow the README less strictly and just get things functioning. Yeah, Mark, I apologize for the inconvenience about that. Yep, there was just some unclear items in there that I've already taken note, and I will be refactoring. So I'm sorry about that. Anyone who suffered through doing your due diligence and following along with the README, many, many apologies. Daniel said, when you add a comment to one post, does that same comment get added to the other comments? No. And the reason for that is this array is separate from this array here. So if you notice, I added these two comments from Ryan Hamlin. It's no longer Leroy Jenkins. I need to go fix that. And they're no longer, they're not on any of the others. Alex asked if one of the benefits of React is it's only updating what it needs to. Why do we need to call prevent default to stop it from refreshing the whole page? That's a good question, actually. So the React synthetic event that mimics the actual event will be changed in some cases. But in most cases, it will behave exactly as the event intends to on the DOM, on the actual DOM. So in this is one of those cases where a form submission a form submit will actually refresh the page. So we're preventing the default of that because we don't want the page to refresh in that manner. So yeah, in this case, yeah, React has the synthetic event, but it's doing the exact same thing as the actual event. That makes sense? So yeah, when we say we're preventing the default behavior of this will be overwritten, and it'll sort of more act like an on-click handler or something. And people do this with vanilla JavaScript and the form event, the submit loop as well. And buttons do this as well. Button type submit does the same thing. It'll refresh the page. So it's a gotcha. It's a very common problem. Okay. All right. So shifting gears, we're going to actually all do a little housekeeping exercise to make sure that we have the current version of the README, okay? So because we have taken the liberty of sort of refactoring how this project works, you'll notice that there are 3 READMEs. Yesterday you were working in day 2, but my day 3 README that's up in GitHub will look drastically different than your README that's in your project. Okay, so we're all going to fix this problem right now. We all have this problem where you don't have changes from master. Okay, I have pushed changes to the master repo in the React Instaclone, okay, that you do not have yet on your local machine. So you're about to learn a really cool Git trick that allows you to stay in sync with what the master repo is doing, especially because you are in branch mode, okay? So everyone go ahead and open your terminal, okay? And make sure you are in the React Instaclone project, the actual root of the README. Okay? This is a follow along. I need to make sure that everyone does this, and we're going to take the next 10 minutes to make sure that you have these changes. There are a couple of you who have done this already, just FYI. Okay. All right, so everyone run the command git remote -v. When you run that command, you should see something like these two lines above, and you shouldn't see any upstream unless you've done this with me already. Okay? So I'm going to just type this message, and I want you to click if you're seeing this output. So go ahead and just give me a one thumbs up. Okay, git remote -v. I'm going to paste the command in Slack and make this as painless for you as possible, because getting changes from master to your remote is a pain. So you're doing this inside of the React Instaclone assignment, in the root of that assignment. So cd, or change directory, into React Instaclone. Okay. Yep, if you don't have upstream, that's totally fine. We're about to get it. Yeah, Alan's right. If you see upstream, you're going to just wait for the last step, because there's changes that you still don't have. So if you've already done this and you actually see upstream, you're going to wait for the last step. Okay, if you don't have upstream, I need you to set your upstream. So how we do this is we say git remote add upstream, and then paste the URL. I'm copying and pasting that into Slack right now. Dang it. Okay. Now do that same command we did earlier, git remote -v, and you should see something that looks like this, where origin is pointing to your fork and upstream is now pointing to master. It should say Lambda School React Instaclone. Cool. When you get there, click on this message. If you're not there, let me know. So you should have run 2 commands now so far, but you've run the first command we did twice. Git remote -v should reveal whether or not you have an upstream, and then adding the upstream should set it to point to our master branch, and then git remote -v should reveal that you have it. Okay, and if you have this already, also post on that message. Click on that message if you were one of those who had it already as well. Okay, I'm going to wait till most of us are there. If you're not there, let us know why. What are the error messages you're getting? Should have over 50 of us click that message. Only 44 have clicked. Tell me why. Tell me what's happened if you are the one who hasn't. Okay? Git remote -v. Let me know if you reveal 4 URLs. Well, 4 messages, 2 origin, 2 upstream. Okay, we got to move on. Okay. The last command that you're going to run, and everybody's going to run this regardless of whether you had this or not. Okay, run git pull upstream master, and it should show you a message of like a bunch of plus symbols and maybe some minus symbols. Okay, but some of us may be brought into what's called Vim mode. You may see a screen that looks a lot like this. Okay, if you got here, all you have to do is hit escape. Okay, hold shift and press colon. And notice that as I did that, I brought up a little cursor down here. So I can type now in Vim mode. And I can just simply type write and quit, WQ. Okay, and hit enter. That I should just have to Q, but for you, you'll have to write quit. And there should be some message that's like merging master or whatever. Okay, so click on this message now. I'm just going to go delete the one above. If you've completed that process. So the last command was git pull upstream master. And then if you have that Vim mode pop up, run colon write quit, but press escape first, just to make sure you escape any characters. You should have gotten a big pull, like a merge request thing and a bunch of green question marks. Yep, so yeah, Libby, you got it. So go ahead and hit escape, type in colon with a shift and hit WQ, and that should write your commit message. You're all going to be proficient at merging from master. Just part of your strategy of the Git things. Yep, just WQ. And I think lowercase is sufficient. You don't need to uppercase it. Remember to thumbs up that message above if you got there. Only 1921. Okay. So this is in regards to new work that I published last night when I decided to refactor this assignment. Yeah, so Aaron, all you need to do is hit escape colon WQ to escape that. I'm going to delete your message really quick because it's a little large. Emac, I would assume that the commands are the same. So Jennifer, if it's not doing something for you, let's see. Here's a good picture. So let's see. So those of you who are in Nano, you can go ahead and just write out. The write out command should just be Shift W, it looks like. Yeah, Patrick's here to save the day. Control 0 or Control O, I mean. Is that, oh, that one's the write out command? Okay, yeah. Control O. Sorry, I read that backwards. Cool. I'm gonna I'm going to send a link to the message above. And if you've already accomplished this, if you have those changes, you should be able to see a README file that's day 3 README that looks a lot like this on screen. Okay? And if you've already done that, you can go take a break because we're going to take a 10-minute break. And then the last half hour, 45 minutes of the morning, we will jam out on high order components. Okay, anyone? So how many people have clicked this message now? If you have a screen that looks like this, make sure you click this message. It's found above, and then go take a break. So 30 of us so far. 31, we're getting there. Apologies for the time commitment, but this is actually teaching you something that you will need to use almost every single day on your day job. How do you merge new changes that come into master into your remote branch? And this is how you do that. Yep, you're all set, Jameson. If your description looks like, if you see this tasks for day 3 and it says create a post page, then building the higher order component called authentication, authenticate, then you're good to go. Pretty much this is all stuff that I put together with this little text snippet, things like that. Okay, there's only 33 of us who have clicked the message. What's stopping us? Please reach out. Let us all know. Don't be ashamed. We can't. I got to make sure that you have today's assignment. You don't have today's assignment yet. Okay, it looks like, to me, it looks like you're just good to go, Daniel. So go check that day 3 README. The message above, this message right here. Okay, remote counting objects 12, remote unpacking objects. So Emmeline, will you send a screenshot real quick of what your command line looks like? Because it looks like you're already done. It looks like you didn't get put into Vim mode. So yeah, if you got the green little snippets or the green little plus symbols, you should go maybe close your editor and open it back up. And it should be day 3 README that looks like this, not the actual README. Okay, so Emmeline, it looks like you're good. It didn't put you in Vim mode. It just looks like, yeah, because it called done. So all you have to do is just hit Control C for a minute, just like hit it a couple times to get to like a new line. So yeah, Daniel, if you got the message that you're saying, that's the confirmation that you got all of the files. So I'm not sure what else. Vim is an editor that's built into your command line. And yeah, if we can't move forward, what I can do is simply just copy and paste this file, and I can just give it to you, and you can go copy and paste it into your code. But if you got those messages, you should have all these changes. That's what's weird. So something interesting must be happening there. But yeah, Daniel, I'm just going to send you. Send you the snippet. Yeah, Emmeline, it looks like you're good to go. Hold on. It says conflicts fixed, but you're still merging. Yep. All you would have to do right now, Emmeline, is do a git commit, and you're good to go. Cool. All right, guys, go take a break. We'll get back here in 5 minutes. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, so hopefully everyone has those edits. If you don't have the new edits, right? Like if you don't have the tasks that talk about authentication, authenticate, the login page assignment, the higher order component, if your README for day 3 does not look like this, I need you to reach out to me and I will get you a copy of this right after our conversation today, okay? So, but we need to move forward, so make sure that you have these edits one way or another. Hopefully you were able to just do it through Git, because this teaches you something that you're going to use very, very commonly. So the question came up and I wanted to make sure everyone heard me address it before we move on. The question came up of, why didn't this overwrite any of my changes that I've been making? Well, Git knows and keeps track of your changes, right? So it knows what files you've been editing, okay? I had been editing a file, day 3 README, that you had not touched yet, right? If you had been changing and making changes in that file, Git would say, oh, master has these changes, and then our local remote has these changes, and we get what's called a merge conflict, which is a message from Git that says, hey, developer, you need to decide which changes you're keeping, because you're going to overwrite some changes from master right now to your repository, okay? And it'll do this anytime you merge a master branch, right? So those are things that you're going to deal with during Lambda Labs, and I'm certain that you'll all be pros at that point by the time you leave Lambda school with merge conflicts. Those who've been there already, you know, it's just part of the day job. Okay, so what are we working on today? Well, the goal is this afternoon that you can kind of get things polished up, and you can, instead of waiting to finish up yesterday's stuff with all the functionality, just move on and try and implement this piece of the application, because you could easily go back and implement the rest of the functionality, the search bar, the click handler, later on after you get this. It's not going to get in the way of that. But I want you to move on and focus on this portion of our project today. What we're going to be building is a higher order component, which we're about to learn about, that will actually allow us to conditionally render either a login page if the user is not logged in, or our app. And that's kind of where we're moving this afternoon, okay? So let's talk about how we get there. So right now you don't know what a higher order component is. So let's learn what a higher order component is. To do this, I'm going to use Code Sandbox. Okay. And we are going to play around with this idea of higher order components inside of Code Sandbox together. And I wrote out a bunch of examples so I can stay on target. Just out of curiosity, who knows what a higher order component is? By chance? Nobody? I don't know what you mean by that, David, as Snoop Dogg is a harder, and it's double G. So it's almost like a parent component. Okay, so who knows what a higher order function is? I think we all kind of have heard this term before, or maybe we haven't, maybe this is the first time. But why is Siri talking to me right now? Go away. Cool. All right. That's creepy. Okay, so a higher order function is a function that can, some func, and it's going to take in another function and then simply return that another func, right? Or some way like this, right? So how can I demonstrate this most proficiently without getting too deep into it, because we need to focus on what it is. So really, it's a function that can receive a function as an argument and then return that argument, right? So it's kind of like a callback, right? So it takes a function as an argument, and it allows you to return a function. So if I had a function, let's do this. Let's say function. What do I want to call this? I could just call it anonymous, but then I'd have to invoke it. So sum, and that's going to take in a function. So func. Dang, I should have written this example down. Return func, right? And it can basically take in that function and then return some function, okay? So this is a concept that is very commonly seen and very commonly used in functional programming, right? Because functions can be passed around as, first-class citizens, right? They can be used as as primitives almost. We can pass them around in JavaScript and use them in other areas, okay? Yeah, it definitely has something to do with closure. So yes, Robin posted a higher order component, HOC, is an advanced technique in React for reusing component logic. Okay, higher order components are not part of the React API per se. They are a pattern that emerges from React's compositional nature. Concretely, a higher order component is a function that takes a component and returns a new component. So that's the beautiful idea here that we're gonna build towards. So what I want to do is I actually want to build out a few components that behave sort of similarly. So in this, I'm going to just go live and let's see, go back. Okay. Where's my go live button? Why can't I see it? Yes, and I will zoom in. Why? Where's my go live button? Interesting. There we go. Good call. 10 points for Jameson. Okay, so let's go live. Joseph asked a good question. So will a higher order component return a new function or just the older function? It's going to return the component that we passed to it. Okay. All right. And then, oh no, are you lagging today, Robin? Let me get rid of some tabs. Try and clean up my space here. I have all my optimizations like down. So, okay. So hopefully lag is not much an issue. Cool. Awesome. Yep, Alan is absolutely right. Alan mentioned higher order component gives the component new superpowers, the component that it takes in new superpowers. Okay, but before we go there, we're just going to create some stuff that we already know how to build. So I'm going to create a new directory, and I'm going to call it buttons. And inside of buttons, we're going to create new files. So we're going to say click button.js. Needs to go in here. We're going to say hover button.js. And we're going to create another new file called keypressButton.js. Cool. So click button is going to import React. I mean, all of them are going to pretty much look and feel exactly the same. So we're going to say import React from React. And then it's just going to be a stateless functional component. So click button equals And eventually it'll receive some props, but we won't worry about that yet. Okay. And then we're just going to return a button who's on click does some stuff. Actually, we want this to be a class component at first, now that I think about it. Okay. And it's going to display this .state .count. So we're going to make this a class component. Because that's the idea here, is we want to mimic the behavior across all of these buttons in the same way. But we're going to build them all out pretty much the exact same first. So we're going to say class extends react.component. Okay. Create a constructor. And this .state. And hold on to our count as 0. And then on click, we'll fire a function that's going to increase our count. I don't know why that's a thing. We'll figure it out in a second. Oh, render. Derp. And increase count is going to simply return this .state where count is going to equal this .state .count and just +1 for now. Okay, so not much going on here. Just a simple React class component. And then we're going to on hover on this one, or on mouse enter. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Key press button. And we're going to say on key press. Okay. So now inside of our app, we can go and pull these files in. Click button. Buttons. Click button. Whoops. And then we're going to call this one hover button. And this one key press button. And then make the 3 components. Okay, a lot of work for 3 buttons, right? And they're simply just like this one hovers. Let me zoom in. Okay, so my mouse hovers over this one and it enters it. We press on this one. This one's doing something wrong. On key press. I thought that was the event. Key press. Is it just called key press? Oh, I thought it was on key press. Let's see why it's not doing its thing. Maybe I have a typo. Let me see, change it to on click. On key press. Should just work. This one works, this one works. Why does this one work? Oh man. Do I have a something? Let's see if there's a better one. I mean, I guess I could just on mouse leave or something. This one now goes on leave, that one's on enter. Okay, so that's fun. Either way, these have the same functionality across the board, right? The only major difference is what? Really, it's just how they are triggering events. I don't know why that key press wasn't working. I was trying it that way. Well, my example shows on key press, and it was working. It's working on my machine, right? Okay, neither here nor there. The big important thing is that we want to actually take this functionality and basically write it one place and then reuse it over and over again. And this is the idea of the higher order component. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a higher order component that can receive a button as its very own as its very own child, right? Or as an argument is what I mean. How we're going to do this? We're going to build a directory and call it. We'll just call it HOC for higher order component. Inside that directory, we're going to build a file and call it button generator.js. So we need to import React from React because that's what we're building here, React components, right? Sorry, yeah, cool. So yeah, I was trying to get caught up and it doesn't look like very many questions came through. Yeah. But yeah, it should still work with a click event. It was working earlier, but maybe the Mac keyboard is different than my keyboard or something. So the way I was trying to play around with it wasn't efficient or wasn't working. Okay, so we're gonna create this as a high order component. Now, inside of your README, you kind of have an example of what you're going to be building, at least the shell of how that's going to work. And so it actually will look a lot like this, where we're going to declare a stateless functional component. Because remember, this is just a function that can receive a component as an argument. So I'm going to say const button generator equals some button that we're going to pass into it. Okay, that's going to return our class. And this is going to be an anonymous class. And this will get defined when we run the code. And it's got to be react.component. And then everything else is the same. But what's different is that this class is now wrapped with an anonymous function. Okay, well, it's not anonymous. Sorry, it's wrapped with a higher order function. And then, of course, we're going to export out the button generator component. Okay. All right, so just like every other class, we need to render something. And in this case, we're going to return the button that gets passed into this component. Okay. Pretty straightforward. This is all stuff that you already know. This is just adding one little layer on top of it. So now we need to pass this button generator function each button that we want generated from it. Okay? So this is where it's all going to come to life. I'm going to import in that button generator. And then I'm going to import it. And then I'm going to pass it. I'm going to define 3 components now, because we need to declare these components and wrap them in the button generator. Okay? So I'm going to define const HOC click button equals button generator, and I'm going to pass it the click button. So now this component can be mounted the same way as any other component. Leave those up there. Okay. Let's see what it does. Virtually, absolutely nothing has changed. Let's take a look at React though. Remember to always be peeking under the hood a little bit. Notice that we have this sort of default class that is wrapping now. It's an anonymous higher order component that's wrapping our click button. The other ones are exactly the same unscathed. Okay? We haven't really accomplished the real benefits of this yet though. So what we need to do is extend the functionality now of our higher order component. But first, let's pass in these other components to our button generator and mount them to the screen to make sure that everything works the exact same. Cool. Looks like I have a typo here. Duplicate decoration. Whoops, that was my bad. Cool. All right, so once again, nothing has changed. These are all still doing their same thing that they were doing, right? Just handling their own state. But the only thing that's different, once again, is that inside of React, we have 3 anonymous classes. I wonder what console, oh, it was just leftover. In React, we have 3 anonymous classes that wrap our components. So if you notice what's getting generated right there, this is kind of the kicker, is that each of these have their own isolated class that are assigned with it. Okay, they have an isolated piece of code that wraps their button, their individual button. And this one, there we go. All right. Thanks. It looks like you and I got to the same conclusion there, Joseph, calling that one out. Cool. So hover, mouse enter, mouse leave. Yeah. Click. Cool. Playing around with buttons. So now here comes the kicker. We're going to take all this functionality. We're going to delete it. We're going to add that functionality into our button generator now. And then we're going to pass this information down as props to all of the buttons that get generated. So I can say count equals this.state.count. And I can also say increase count equals this.increase count. Okay? So we need to go refactor our buttons. Take it down. It's going to be const. Getting everything backwards today. So now I can say props.count and props.increase count. And we got to get rid of render. Cool. Let's do the same here. And get rid of all this. Cool. Ty asked a very important question, and I'll get to in just a minute. But notice that button generator is declared in one place. It's a function who takes a component and then returns a class that returns that component. Okay? And it's got all of this functionality that we're passing on to any of the components that get passed to it. So how is this different than just having children in our app? Because Ty mentioned, so is this the same we're doing before with app.js and components underneath it? I will ask you that question. How is it not the same? And anyone can answer that. It doesn't have to be Ty. The main reason that I think it's not the same. Yep, it's similar. Okay. Separation concerns. Okay, so the main reason that it's not the same is all three of these buttons have their own state. If I were to pass them all in an app and control state there, they're all feeding off of the app component state. But notice what all of these get. All of them get their own separate state that we declared once, right? And it's all separate. So they have shared functionality and they have a similar state, but they all separate that out by itself. Yeah. So this is a pretty trivial example. And how it plays into your afternoon assignment is you're going to be building sort of a conditional rendering higher order component. Okay? So that higher order component will be something that will sort of take in an authentication system. So if I were to conceptualize this, and if I were to sort of pseudocode this whole thing out, and once again, we want you to start here today, okay? I could take the day 3 README, and let's look at kind of what our component's going to look like. And let's start to think about this in terms of what we're going to be building. So if I was going to do this with an authentication system, that was then going to mount our app component, because if I go to index.js and I want to say that that app will actually be mounted by calling authenticate and passing app through authenticate. Right? Authenticate's not defined. We would need to import it. Okay. And authenticate's only job is to do some conditional checking, right? If a user is logged in, or if a user exists in local storage or whatever, then we will render the app, right? Otherwise, we'll render a login page or something. But if you notice, well, it shouldn't have broken everything. It has broken everything, but shouldn't. But that's sort of the idea here. Authenticate's going to take in your app component and mount it up only if a user is actually logged in. And you're going to figure out how to build that login system and everything. And there's some fun logic there. Okay. I had a really in-depth example on this stuff that I'm thinking about talking about more tomorrow, because it's like, well, why else would this be nifty other than just like some simple buttons? I think we might get to it tomorrow if I have time. Today, we spent an ample amount of time actually, debugging some stuff with housekeeping items. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this assignment or about what you're about to embark on? And remember, I want you to start on today's assignment, even if you don't have everything from yesterday or Monday completed. Figure out why it broke. Yeah, let's figure out. Inside of index. I think it's because of this. Look at how my other higher order components are. It's not giving us any console errors, is it? Functions are not valid as React children. So what I need to do is say const wrapped app. And then mount wrapped app was my final step, I think. There it goes. Cool. So I just needed to declare this. Wonder if that's gonna, yeah, it should be great. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna share this with you all unless you want to fork it now. So the non-live edition is, I don't even know if, were we still live there? Yeah. Oh, no others were in the classroom. Looks like we were live, but nobody joined me. I didn't share. Yep, just to clarify, each button has its own state. Let's take a look at that. So you can play around with the example too. But yeah, notice that our entire component is wrapped, our entire application is wrapped in that authenticate, right? Now, this component has a state count of 2. If I click it, it's going up. Okay, click button. This component, hover button, has a count of 5, its own state, right? But you wrote the state in one file. You wrote it in your generator file. Yeah, Alex, the solution code is published, and there is a link to it. So there's a sandbox for yesterday's solution published where everything kind of works together. I think it's this one. If I search for Twitch, let's see. Yeah. So I can search, I can click on things, and it likes a bunch of stuff. It's not great, and then the persistence is there. So that's here. Okay. And then your there's a branch for it up in the README. So how many of you are aware that you can go click on the branches? Right? Don't look at refactor because there's nothing there for you, but day 1, 2, and 3 solution are all available for you to peek at if you get stuck. I recommend only getting here if you're approaching the end of the day after a long day of working hard, or if you're going to work with your project manager to kind of look at the approach, but never, ever, ever go and copy and paste your code. Okay? Always type it out. So Ty asked a good question. Is each button considered like an individual user? Yeah, they're an individual subscriber to that higher order component, right? So that's a good way to look at it. Also, this may have been addressed, but my impression was that each app should only have one state. Why are we invoking multiple states? That's not the truth. You should not have an app that has one single state. Especially in React. You're going to have an app that has multiple components with multiple states. When you get to Redux, yes, you will have one source of truth, one state object. But even then, you can still have component state for trivial things, right? So the conception of, oh, your app should only have one state object, that's a misconception. You should make sure that you know when and where to use state appropriately. Cool. That's a very, very good observation, though, Ahmed. Okay. All right, gang. Go to lunch. Make sure you start on day 3. Work through the project there that's found in the README. If your README does not have instructions that look like mine, please, please, please let me know. Okay? All right, gang. We'll talk to you soon.